Welcome to the Creative Flight, my private jet that today will take us on a bit of a journey. It's special because it can go to the past, it can stay in the present, or we can fly to the future. My guest today is my friend Chris Doe. Here's a little bit about Chris. You can't walk the streets with him without someone stopping for a photo. Not because of his chiseled cheekbones, but because of his extraordinary mission to impact lives every day. And from being an Emmy Award winner to inspiring countless creatives, Chris's accolades are impressive. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Sorry, I was just doing a little dusting, polishing before I got on the show. Thanks for having me, Ivy. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm very happy that you are here. I've never seen this. This is the first time you're actually showing it to me.
Well, here it is. It just sits over here.
And how many times do you touch it every day to make sure it's
just
real?
When I need to, flex on people.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mission, because it's really impressive?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking me that question. My mission is to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love without losing their soul, without feeling gross.
How did you know that that is the mission that you want?
It was like, I think, late in December of 2018, and we're in the transitional phase of like, are we going to be a service company? Or are we an education company? And so I'm gathered in my conference room table with my management team. And Matthew Encino, who was one of my creative directors at that time, had said, Chris, what are we trying to do? Do we need to make more courses? Did we try to get brand deals? What are we trying to do? And he kind of put me on the spot, and all these eyes are looking at me. I see all these eyes that are 4 people in the room. I'm like, I better explain this. And I think this is the first time they hear something like this. I said, you know what? I envision a future one day where instead of going to uni, you'll be able to take an online course. And my children are advanced enough in age that I don't think I can get there to be the solution for them. But I said, Ben has a little girl. And I think that at that time she's like 3 years old. And I think, well, in 15 years, we better be able to do this, because otherwise I'm just wasting my time. And I say, so it's too late for my kids, but it'll be in time for Ben's kids when they're of college age. And I saw in Ben's eyes, he's an emotional, responsive, reactive person. I don't know if it's true, but I imagine him like tearing up a little bit, like it hit him. And I knew I needed to tell this story, but I don't have time to talk about it in this way. So that night I went home, I thought about it. Next morning I came in, it's like, I want to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. And Ben's like, that's it. That's exactly it. That's how we came up with it.
And that's it, just overnight.
Overnight, my geniosity.
And what made you choose 1 billion? Like it's a humongous number. Can't even fathom it.
Well, I believe in having a big, hairy, audacious goal. And if we just look at the number of people who are subscribing to the channel, I think we're getting close to 1 million. So it can't be 1 million. I just like big round numbers. And I was thinking, man, it's not so much that I care to achieve this billion, or even if it's possible, but to set your sight so high, your goal so high that it forces you to think differently. So when the team always asks me, wouldn't we be happier if we just made one course and sold it and made $10 million a year? I said financially, I would be much happier, but spiritually, in alignment with what it is I'm trying to achieve with this time that I have on earth, it's just not going to go anywhere. And I always wonder this about rich people. It's like, how much money is too much money? How much money do you really need to have in order to live? Can you even spend it all? So it becomes a game of acquiring more money. I want to acquire 1 billion, but not $1 billion. I want to impact 1 billion lives in a positive way. So that's what always sets us back on path, because like, shouldn't we just reduce it down to this? But how are we going to achieve our mission then, boys and girls? How do we achieve that if we just sell a course? We become a lifestyle business. You'll work less, I'll make more money, but it doesn't really get me there. So it needs to be this big goal. Keeps us honest.
You've literally just come off a LinkedIn call with Jewel that didn't end up being a LinkedIn call. It ended up being a webinar. And you experienced a little bit of turbulence, as I would call it, in the beginning of this call. There was supposed to be something else that was happening. At that moment, you had over maybe 200 people who had signed up to say that they were going to attend this call, probably waiting on LinkedIn, but you weren't there. What was going through your mind at that time?
Oh, nothing. I don't even care. Jewel and I, we talked about this. We take on things that make us more stressed out. Like we have to do a simulcast, and I've never done that, right? And we said the intention was to be able to teach a few people, to be able to use video as a teaching tool. And that's all we cared about. So if LinkedIn doesn't work, because the handshake between Zoom and LinkedIn doesn't work, we'll still have a great conversation. And if no one shows up, you and I will have a great conversation because we like to talk to each other. So I know that there's plan A, B, C, D, and E. There's a contingency for everything. And so something froze in the connection. Everything was working prior to the point in which I hit go live, and then it just froze on us. And after trying to restart it several times, we're done. So I don't care anymore. What am I going to do?
How did you get to that point that you don't care? For me, it'd be like, oh no, I'm supposed to be somewhere. I said I was going to be somewhere, but I'm not there. How did you come to this place where you're just like so zen and you're like, yeah, I didn't even think about it?
You know, in Japanese, do means the way. I don't know if you know that.
No, I didn't
I'm
know
not
that.
even Japanese, but do just means the way, like judo, you know?
Okay.
It's like, this is the way. It just works out pretty well for me. I'll frame it this way. I used to get a lot of stress with things that are out of my control. And that's usually one of the biggest drivers of stress, not feeling like you're in control. And the simplest way I can explain to you is this. I've had business meetings before when we were stuck in traffic. This is like real money, like with NBC or somebody big. It's not like Joe Schmo down the street. And we're stuck in traffic. We left an hour and 15 minutes early, but we should have left 2 hours early, LA being LA, driving through Hollywood. It's murder. And I just like, you know what? There's a lesson to be learned here, is to don't schedule a meeting in the middle of the day across town and not leave 2 hours early. I've learned this lesson. It's going to be bad. Call the clients, let them know we're stuck in hellacious traffic, and let them know as soon as possible. And then I just surrender to the forces. Like, nothing I do will change the traffic. I can't move through this any faster. I have to accept this moment for what it is. So I try my best to just accept it. And that way I don't show up in the meeting all sweaty and apologetic and compounding the problem. We made a mistake. We paid for that mistake, by the way. And I would just want to be able to say, you know, there are lots of things in your life that you cannot control. Trying to change that at this point, it's not going to put you at your best.
I 100% see what you're saying. I understand it. I rationally get it. But my question is, how did you get to that point? Because surely you weren't born like this. And if you were, that's amazing. But what was the pivotal point for you? When did you learn this lesson?
I know that a lot of people don't work like this, but when I encounter a situation, I go inward. I think about what it is that I feel and how I want to resolve this, and I make a decision. And generally, when I make a decision like that, I don't ever go back. It's just the switch has been flipped. I'm not the same person tomorrow than I am yesterday. So I'm like, I'm done. I just move on. And there's this thing, I know you know this thing. It's called the serenity prayer. Although I'm not super religious myself. And it goes something like this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I feel like I came to that same conclusion on that trip 17 years ago.
And when you see your team, as an example, if we put this in a business perspective, maybe behaving more in the way that you wouldn't want to, like they are taking on the stress, they're making the same mistake over and over again. How do you handle that? Because it's so different from the way you are. Let's say your team doesn't behave that way. How do you handle that?
I also go back to the serenity prayer. It's not my job to fix people. It's not my job to make them like me. They get to decide who they want to be. And I don't really have any power over that anyways. What I can do is lead by example. And when necessary, try to help guide them through this process. But everybody arrives at their destination when they're supposed to, not on my timeline. I'll give you an example. I remember Ben and Matthew who were pitching on a really big project, and it was a lot of money on the table. And I got really nervous. And I just walked in the room. I was like, what's going on, guys? Like, oh, this big project. And like, I could see there's just too much nervous energy. I said, hey, let me ask you this question. Before we called for this job, how was your life? Everything was fine. So if we don't get this job, how's your life? It'll be exactly the same. Why did this one momentary thing change how you see life? I hope you get the job. It'll be okay if we don't. But I know something. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, you'll sabotage our ability to get the job.
What is it then that would drive the team to actually go and get it? So many people are driven by fear. What is the alternative drive?
Well, I try not to hire people who are driven by fear. When I recognize them, I try to help them overcome it, or I help them out the door, because it's hard to work with people who are constantly afraid of something. I think what drives them to achieve and to win is this great sense of agency, autonomy, and that someone above them believes in what they do, supports them when they win or they lose. I wouldn't call it this, but it's approaching this concept of unconditional love or unconditional acceptance. You can win, you can lose. Either way, I still accept you and we'll be all right. Just do your best.
Is there a moment where you feel like that's backfired for you?
No, I mean, I don't know how anybody could be upset at somebody that tries their best. I mean, is there more than your best? I don't know.
Not so much that they haven't tried, but is there a moment where that trust that you have given to the team that is backfired? And is there a story you'd like to share?
I wouldn't use the word backfired, but I will share some things, okay? There's this expression within production and creative service professionals, which is creativity expands and contracts to meet a deadline. Creativity expands or contracts to meet a deadline. So if you give someone 4 weeks to do it, it'll take 4 weeks. If you give them 4 days to do it, it'll take 4 days, etc. We understand that because ideas ruminate and we kind of torture ourselves over it. So deadlines actually are the creative person's best friend, because it means that there's a finish point and we don't have to sit here and have some kind of existential crisis going on, like, am I worth this? And what is my best work and who am I? And I don't matter. Where does this become a problem? Well, I practice something called intentional or conscious incompetence. I'll explain what it means, okay? I don't think I've ever heard anyone else describe it this way, but intentional incompetence, not impotence, just incompetence. Okay, just put that out there. What it means is, well, let me just tell you the story. Many, many years ago, when I was just starting out my company, my older brother was involved and we were talking about something and I said, hey, I need to learn how to code websites, because if we're going to build websites, I need to know what I'm doing. He goes, is that really what you want to do? And I was taken aback, because I was like, don't we need to learn more skills? And he says, don't get good at something that you don't plan on doing. There's really no point. You hired good people, let them do that job. Do you envision that you wanted to code websites? I'm like, no, that stuff makes my brain hurt. So let someone else do it. And I start to learn this idea, and it helps me to delegate tasks to other people. And here's the thing. Your team, they're really smart. When you are the best fill in the blank marketer, copywriter, web developer, designer, spokesperson, social media person, content person, editor, they start to regress in their progression as creative humans, because they also shrink and contract to their boss's competence. And you know this. If you're a really good writer and they submit something and you're like, oh, just give it to me, I'll rewrite it. You don't have to do that a couple times before they're like, I shouldn't write anything. Not because I don't like Ivy. I just believe she's so good at doing this that everything I do feels like crap. They get really insecure. So you'll see less and less trying, less and less output from them. And then the boss or you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing all the work. Why am I? Now I'm becoming really resentful for all these people I give money to who aren't doing anything for me. When in fact, you're sort of to blame. Whether you are to blame or not, it's your responsibility now. So I do this thing where I'm like, I don't want to get good at this. You guys need to figure it out. So that creates a lot of stress for them, because they know I don't know how to do anything. So then they have to figure it out. So then what they do is they expand to meet me at my incompetence versus my competence. I don't want to outshine everybody that works for me. I want to outshine them in one category or two at most, but not everything. So people who are Da Vinci of our time, well, no one's going to want to work for you, really. They'll work under you, but they don't work with you in that way. So I try not to be good at anything. So case in point, this morning, I asked Andres to set up the Zoom link webinar, and I sent him the video. I asked Drigo to help in case, and I know how to do it. I'm looking it up myself, but I want them to do it. And so this is how I practice that. So this usually works out. It doesn't always work out. So I've had people that work for me that I did not hire or interview. They didn't survive the gauntlet of Chris interviewing people and looking for all of your weaknesses and your strengths. And so when those people join the team, I ask them to do something. There's this weird moment where I recognize I see. You're here just to do a job. And when the job gets difficult, you don't really want to apply yourself. You don't expand to meet the gap. Eventually, those people, I have to find them a new job.
I recognize this when I've also hired lots of people in the past, and what you're saying is really resonating with the expanding and contraction. And I would almost call it that you yourself cap their talents or their abilities when you don't allow them to actually flourish. But I've noticed that in the past, when I have given people too much free rein, too much creativity, it has been overwhelming for them and they haven't been able to rise. And I wonder if those are the people that you've then had to let go or, find another role for. Is that something that resonates with you, with the overwhelming amount of freedom and creativity?
I see where you're going with this. I can see the potential problem. What I'm talking about isn't that. So when I work with my creatives who are designing something, I give them pretty clear boundaries in which they can play in. Because otherwise they go off the reservation, so to speak, and they come back and they're frustrated. They don't know what they're doing. And I don't like anything that they're doing. That's not the same thing. But like, say, for example, if your job is to help with the live stream and video production, that should be your job. You should get into the machine, figure out the codecs and the setups and the hotkeys. That's kind of your job, the job that I pay you for. And the reason why people usually fail here, not in my instance here, is we hired the wrong people, put them into a position that they weren't prepared for or have no interest in doing. We underpaid people, so we're getting less qualified people and we're expecting too much from them. But if you hire the right people, you pay them a fair wage to do a job that they're passionate about, this should not be a problem. And I'll tell you, the classic example is if you're a director and you're walking on set and the DP, the cinematographer, is lensing and working with the gaffer and the lighting and all that kind of stuff. And you come in like, no, change all the lights. And after a while, your DP is like, yo, man, what's up? I got this. But if you were clear, like, I'm going for something very natural looking, but a little bit darker and more somber, and you let them do their job, you've hired the right people, they fill in all the imagination gap and they deal with all the technical problems so that it's not your job to figure out. But we've seen this happen a lot, where directors who grew up learning first cinematography come in and they're like, nah, it's not going to. So after a while, I think everybody just checks out.
How do you usually assemble a team? I'm assuming you've had growth, you've had stagnation, you've had it all. You've been in business so long. You've been through different sizes of your companies. How do you decide on who to hire and who does the hiring in your business?
I've made a lot of mistakes in hiring, and I paid for in firing. I think we hire people based on this whole, like, there's a fire. I got to put out the fire, and the way I put out fire is just throw warm bodies at it. And then we inherit a team that we weren't very conscientious of hiring and figuring out if this is going to be a good fit for us long term. I've gone through many phases of, unfortunately, growth and contraction. I've had to lay off a lot of people relative to the size of our company, like a third of our staff at a point. And it's painful. It's really painful. But I've learned a couple of things, so I'm going to share with you the lessons I've learned. Number one is to have a clear vision of your culture and to be able to communicate that internally and externally. And to literally hire based on whether or not they're a culture fit. So the way that we used to do this is there was a technical fit. Your resume, do you know this programming language? Do you know how to use this suite of applications? And then they would pass that and then move into the culture fit. And the way that I've done it that works the best is the people that I believe most exemplify the culture that we hope to cultivate, they're the ones who decide if this person is a good fit, regardless of the position, regardless of the hierarchy. So people could literally hire their bosses. And when we've listened to them, things work out. So we stop not listening to them. So HR or production might say, this person's way more qualified. But it's that the culture team says, this is the person they want to work with. We're going to go with that person. And it works out, and it's worked out. So where have things gone off the rails? That the people that are making the hiring decisions haven't been through that process and haven't been personally vetted by me, and they're the sole decision maker and not a small group of people making the decision if it's a good culture fit. Now, our company has evolved a lot. Today, I don't think I'm ever going to hire somebody who doesn't know who we are, doesn't believe in the mission, and doesn't want to support us doing that. If they're showing up because there's a job posting, I already can tell you right now, you're not for us.
But even to this day, you would do the culture fit hiring. So there is a culture team, so to speak, who's checking for fit. I love that.
There should be, but there isn't one now because we're scattered like digital nomads, and it's becoming harder and harder to maintain a sense of culture. There's a lot of isolation that we're trying to sort out now that everyone's remote.
Huh, that's interesting. I never thought, well, it didn't strike me in this conversation that we're having just now that would be something that would be manifesting. What have you put in place to reignite culture?
Nothing. It's a problem. So we're in the process, and it started early this year, of removing people that unfortunately were a good culture fit, but weren't a good work fit, or someone who was the opposite, right? They're a good work fit, but they're a poor culture fit. Like they were productive, they did their job, but I don't want to say I'm not vibing with you, but you definitely, like, you're zigging, we're zagging, and it's not working. But I'm slowly building back the team, and I need to be much more intentional and to be working with people more directly so I know that they're good. So I would say like my video content team right now is really good. So the 3 or 4 people who work with me on the YouTube content and on the podcast, they're of the tribe. All of them have come up because they watch our content. They try to support me in one way or the other. And a relationship has built up over years to a point in which I think we should work together. We should formalize this relationship in one way or the other. And I'm really enjoying it. I shared this story with my friend Daniel Priestley recently. And I was telling him about our podcast friends. You know, his name is Rich. He helps me with a podcast. And I said, we're like thick as thieves because Rich will fly out to meet me where I'm at when I'm doing an event so that he can support me. He flies out on his own dime and uses his connections and resources. He literally will pick me up at the airport, which he's done, take me to the venue, book the room on his own dime. And I think Daniel's shocked. It's like people will do more than what you pay them to do. And Rich is not the only one. And you know this. Our other people on our team, Drigo and Mo, they routinely fly out to meet me somewhere, again, on their own dime, to try to support me or to do something with me. And then in my heart, I just like, this is the culture. This is the team. And there's a reasonable explanation for all of this, I think.
Which is? The
reasonable explanation is, number one, is I believe they feel deeply connected to the mission, that they all received some value at some point in the far past. And they're like, I believe in this dude and what he's trying to do. He's helped me personally. What can I do to help? And then on the other side is when you give me something, I don't just give you back what you gave me. I give you 2x, I give you 5x, I give you 10x. So I'm mentoring these young men, in this case right now they're men, and I'm trying to help them grow their business. And so they're getting mentorship, they're furthering the mission. I'm trying to improve their business, introducing them to people. And so I think if in an ideal world, teams could be built this way, it'd be a fabulous place in the world.
It sounds idyllic, but for people who are listening, some of the questions that might pop up would be, well, what if they're just using you? What if they're just trying to get to that connection? You are helping them. How would you respond?
How would you define using someone?
For personal gain, disregarding the other.
Yeah. You know, people on the outside do look at these things like, you know, that person's only cozying up to you because they want to get something from you. They're clout chasing. They want to be within the halo in which you've produced. I'm like, is that a bad thing? If someone wants to help me and I want to help them back of our own free will, I don't know if we would call that using. Using seems like it's a one-sided or lopsided relationship where you take more than what you give. And it's very transactional. I'm going to help Ivy because tomorrow I'm going to ask Ivy for something. And Ivy is going to feel indebted to me because I already done something. And our relationship never grows beyond that. I'm a pretty good judge of character. And when I see someone, I really see them. I know who they are in their heart. And I figured this game out a long, long time ago, back when I was in college. When someone shows me the darker side of their personality, I put them in different categories of people that I'm going to allow to get close to me. I've been wrong a few times, but not very often. And I can tell. I can really tell. And you know what? I feel this way. I've been very fortunate and privileged to be in a place where I can actually have influence over other people. I have some form of internet fame. And if I can't use my influence or my air quotes fame to help the people I care about, what is the point of acquiring any of this stuff? So when a person reaches out to me and says, hey, can we be a guest on your podcast or will you be one on ours? It's pretty clear what's happening here. We either want to be on your platform because you have the audience that we want to speak to, or we want to bring the people who follow you to what we're doing so that we can put a little shine over here. So in essence, everybody who's asked to be on a podcast or has interviewed me is using me. I live in the real world. This is happening all the time. But I try not to do it in a way that feels so quid pro quo. And I'll tell you something. I know you know this, but our audience doesn't. Drigo is one of the few people who have actually literally been to my house. There's less than 6 people that are not related to me. And he's lived here for days at a time. And he's helping me. Yet what he does is he's looking out for me in many different ways. You know, we'll go shopping together, we'll go and eat, and we'll talk about life and family and relationships. And I like to be able to help people. So if I can mentor this young man, guide him along his life, and he's making himself super helpful to me, adding a lot of value to my life, I'm like, this is probably the little brother I've always, wanted, but comes in conveniently and I don't have to deal with any other BS, right? I do have a little brother, by the way. It works out pretty well, I think.
Yeah. And I've been fortunate enough to witness this. Like, I can definitely see how people flock to you. They also want to give without taking. I don't think it's always, oh, I will help, and then I will get something in return. But so many stories that you've shared, so like, oh, this has happened. I'm like, oh, that's incredible. The generosity of people. And you talk about this quite a lot, the law of reciprocity. And it seems like you're seeing the result of that because you've been giving for how many years? How many years have you been going on YouTube and just giving so much value?
10. But I taught for 15 years before that.
So the law of reciprocity is working for you.
I think so. And it's not a real law. Like somebody's like, let me look it up. Where does it say in the Constitution? It's just this general idea of like karmic equity. It doesn't work the way you would like it to work, which is you put $1,000 in and you get $1,000 out or more. It's just, I trade in the currency of generosity. So I give, and I've said this before, I want to give so much value to you that you feel guilty, as if you're stealing from me. And so you're like, I better give you something back. And that's what people do.
And when they don't?
It's okay. I don't expect anything.
That's what I love about you. Everything is just okay.
Everything's just okay. I should write a book called Everything's Just Okay. And the thing is, the people who want to be within my inner circle of friends, people I trust and care about and look after, they don't get there by random chance. They've demonstrated to me the character of who they are long before they're invited into the circle. Because as you may know, I'm pretty guarded when it comes to that. As Jose, my former business partner, would say, the gates to your castle are very tall. But once you're inside, it's pretty cool.
So if someone wants to get into that castle, what do they have to do?
I cannot tell you these secrets.
The listeners want to know.
Should I tell you?
No, let it be a mystery.
Yeah. I can just tell you one thing, though. If you're a genuine person who truly cares about people and want to do things because it feels good to help people, that's your nature. And then I would just say act within your nature and it's fine.
You talked about fame a little bit, and I want to go there, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I would consider you famous. Would you consider yourself famous?
More every day. More every day.
More every day. Do you feel like you show up differently because there are more people watching? Or are you just one and the same every day?
Can you point out a time when you think I show up differently? Because I'm having a hard time mapping that.
I don't think so. I feel like you are the same, but I'm just wondering from intrinsically from you, do you think about it differently? You're like, okay, wait, now more people are paying attention to me.
Oh, okay.
I must be more wary or something like that.
Yeah, I do. There's a reason why. And when I don't, it becomes problematic. When you broadcast your message to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, they walk away with a feeling about you. And there's this expression, be careful meeting your idols or your heroes because they'll disappoint you. I don't want to disappoint people like that. And so if I go out, and I'm recognized more and more these days in places where I go, I don't want to show up looking like a scrub. Because then they're like, dude, I thought the drip game was on point, and here you are in flip flops and like a stained tank top or something. It's unbecoming of you. I'm like, yeah, I know, sorry. And I run to people in the weirdest places, at airport security, at Trader Joe's, and in the parking lot of XYZ, in the back alley of some seedy restaurant or bar. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm consistent in that way, in that now I don't want to go out and do that. I don't want to go out there and be like super sloppy or something. So yeah, I'll make sure to wash my face. I'll make sure to shave or brush my teeth or whatever it is. And I might not do that at home, right? Because who's going to judge me at home? I'm like, I'm just comfortable like this. And the other thing too is, if I have a bad day and somebody runs into me and like, geez, that guy's a jerk and a half. All that stuff on TV was just an act. But that was just the one you caught me at a bad moment, friend. And so I don't want to do that either. So I have to be kind of mindful about my energy. And something happened recently in Toronto. I can't say 100% that's the same person, but I'm almost sure it's the same person. So I flew in the night before. I'm not operating a lot of sleep. I give the presentation about how to sell your services and to be of value to other people. And quite literally, as soon as I get out and I'm getting ready to get on another flight, I have a precious few hours to talk to people. This person comes up to me in a circle of people who want to get their questions in. He's dragging on about his question. He's asking me everything that is the opposite of what I stand for. He goes, Chris, I'm a really big fan, and how do I charge for this and that? I'm like, you were in the auditorium when I was speaking about how to charge, right? So now I'm getting a little irritated. He keeps going on, and I'm just like, you cannot tell me you're a fan of what I'm saying and doing if you're not applying any of this. I said, you got to stop this, because you're going to make me upset. I'm going to say something I'm not going to be happy with myself if I do. So there's a combination of a lot of things going on there that I may have reacted or responded differently, but I don't think so. But that person goes away thinking, what a jerk. And he writes in one of our YouTube channels, like, Chris is nothing like I thought. He's X, Y, and Z. And he goes and describes it. So I think it's the same person. I don't know. But that's kind of world that I'm living in. And I'm trying to not have many of those instances, right? Because I am a genuinely caring person. I am. This is not an act. I'm trying to help people, and I don't want that to be their takeaway.
I can definitely testify to the fact that you genuinely care and you are very interested. It just seems to me like right now you're in a position where you're not allowed to have a bad day.
Well, good news is, Ivy, I don't have many bad days.
That's great news. I love that for you. So you also said that you had to be, well, they not had to be, but you're more conscious about what you're putting on when you're stepping outside. And, we like to talk about clothes and fashion, your drip. So what I'm asking people on the podcast is that as you come into this flight, this creative flight, what are you wearing? What are you wearing today? For those who can't see you but are just listening in.
I'm wearing James Purse camouflage sweatpants. I'm wearing a very new limited edition collab between Studio Innate and God is the Designer. I'm wearing my Louis Vuitton chain, which I almost always wear. And I'm wearing a brand new hat. I don't know if you can tell. It's the Icon hat, but it's a different colorway. Like, brave decision, friend. It's the same hat, just different colors. But that's what I'm wearing.
And how do you make decisions about what to wear? Like, I know that you're very particular about how you piece things together. Maybe if you can talk through your process a little bit.
I have, unfortunately for the closet size and the budget, so to speak, I like different genres of styles, and it becomes hard because you have those things don't go together. I really like this great West, like Western attire that you would see in cowboy movies, like that is exemplified by the RRL Ralph Lauren brand. So a lot of texture, wool, patterns, denim, and just but tailored. I like that. And that's a whole look and vibe. And it's closely related to, but not 100% compatible with, the other look that I like, which is like this kind of hipster outdoors person who hunts but never hunts. So I got my duck boots, my flannel, my camouflage prints, my vest, the corduroy, and just like this outdoorsy American vibe. And then I have my denim G-Star street style, and then I have my more avant-garde technical apparel. So those are like 4 different wardrobes that I'm trying to reconcile. And there's a 5th one, which is just super sharp, crisp suits and ties. So 5 different styles.
When we've talked in the past, you've talked about how you focus on textures and different patterns, and you like piecing those things together. Do you want to expand a little bit about that? Because I find that really interesting, how you actually observe clothes and when you what you look for.
Right. This goes back to my training as a designer, my fascination with design. And when I say design, I mean graphic design. And when I learned the rules of design and how to make something look beautiful and to catch your attention, but also be super functional, I start to look at those principles applied across to architecture, interior design. The same principles are true in fashion, I believe. So the first thing that we do is when we look at a piece of design, we squint our eyes and it compresses the values in which we can see. It's a real thing. You squint your eyes. And so when you look at a person walking up to you, if you squint your eyes, what can you see? So the first thing you can really see are usually color and shape. So we talk about the silhouette. And the silhouette's a really interesting thing to play off. Because if we're all walking around naked, our silhouette's very similar. Some people have more hips, some people have wider shoulders or taller, shorter, but the silhouette doesn't change that much. But with clothing, you can change the silhouette dramatically. You can have a higher or lower waistline. So in certain circles, it's cool to wear very baggy pants, and so they kind of barely hang onto your hips. I'm not a fan of that look, but that changes the waistline. And some, they'll wear the waistline almost above their belly button, so it's really high on their torso. And it's a different look, so it extends the length of your legs if you're looking for more a regal, elegant look. And if we do baggy, then we want to contrast that with something that's tight. We don't want to be baggy all over the place because then it's just a big old marshmallow. So the things that you want to look for in fashion is the silhouette, the shape, the colors. Usually when I say color, I don't mean literally like hue, but I'm talking about contrast, dark, light. And then we look at pattern and texture. And so you can play around with those 4 dimensions and come up with nearly infinite combinations of things that you can put together. And I as a kind of a late bloomer into the world of luxury fashion, I'm starting to look at accessories and how for men, especially because there's not a lot of things we can do to accentuate things, but having a nice belt or a scarf or a watch or a cap or a pair of glasses really can say, like, despite the rest of you, you put thought into this and there's a crispness to your look. So it's kind of like the cake is all the same, but the way that you do the frosting or the flower, the one decorative element is the thing that says, no, you're really well put together. This is a vibe.
I like that. When you were talking about accessories, oftentimes when I go shopping, I go to the men's section because I know that it seems contradictory because there's so much women's stuff out there, but sometimes I really like the male silhouette and I think it's really interesting. Unfortunately, my body is not good for the male silhouette because it's much more curvaceous, but it's interesting to watch. Do you sometimes go to the women's section and see what they have because it's so much more expensive?
I have not yet ventured forth into the women's area. I'm still processing what's available to men, and there's a lot there. But my wife says similar things for different reasons. She likes the colorways, the patterns for men. Oftentimes on certain lines, she goes, I love this brand, but not the women's line, I like the men's line. And I think that's like opening the door for all of us to move away from traditional definitions around what a man or a woman can wear. Women can wear pants if they want, and men can wear dresses if they want. And I'm experimenting with that, and it gets a lot of looks, both good and bad, but I'm okay with that because I want to push the boundary a little bit. Like, what am I comfortable wearing? I will say this though, a lot of times the patterns for shoes and the colors are more interesting to me with the women's version of the men's shoe. I'm not talking about high heels. I'm talking like sneakers and those kinds of things where I'm like, darn it. Or even jackets. I'm sorry. So I stand corrected. Sometimes I need to get the women's jacket because it's cut differently than the men's jacket because I don't know why, but I know why. In America, I think the standard person is much bigger than me in girth and all dimensions. And so when I buy the small or extra small, I'm like, this still doesn't fit me. It's draping in a way it's not meant to. I will then go to the larger size of the women's version of it. I'm like, the pattern's cooler. It's much more interesting. Or like I'm into patterns and floral prints and things like that as a contrast to like bold shapes. And so I think that's really cool.
Is there anything recent that you've bought that you want to share about that is exciting? to hear about.
Yeah, I would say. Whenever I get a strong reaction from my wife, I know I've done good things, both good and bad, because sometimes she'll dismiss it and like, no, that's terrible. And then it takes a while for her to see it all put together. And she goes, I love it. I'll give you 2 examples. I'm not here to make fun of my wife, but this chain that I'm wearing from Louis Vuitton, I was in the store and she was like, oh, no, it's not. I'm like, babe, let me put it on. Take a look at it. Don't want it. I DM my cousin. I should go buy it for me. But then I wear it and she goes, oh, that just kind of makes it, right? Another example. We go to the optical shop together. Like every year and a half, I need to buy a new frame because styles change a little bit. And I just, like the frames I used to love, I don't love so much anymore. So I'm in this kind of like third world dictator mode where I'm asking the person behind the counter, give me the most obnoxious pair of glasses. Like I have cataracts and I'm 75 years old. Give me those glasses, like old grandpa glasses. And they bring us, I'm like, bigger. Like bigger? I'm like, bigger. Just keep, finally bring out the pair that I'm wearing. And I put it on and look at my wife. She goes, oh, that's too much, babe. It's just, it's too much. I'm like, I like them. She goes, no, maybe it's my opening. I'm going to buy it. I wear them now. And she cannot see me without these glasses because they're such a big statement. So then these 2 things coupled with something else, and she goes, it always makes everything else work. So this is advice for people who struggle with fashion. You need to find 1 or 2 signature things that really elevate your whole fashion game. Because you're like, I could never wear that. It's because those things aren't present in your current wardrobe. And I don't mean just wardrobe, like if you cut your hair differently, if you're a little bit more avant-garde with asymmetry or a certain style or even a color, the rest of you will just look great because that frames everything else. Now, I recently purchased a couple of things from Alexander McQueen. Very expensive brand. I don't know how well it's made, but I'm really fascinated by the kinds of ideas they explore at that fashion house. And bold prints, unusual floral prints and asymmetry in terms of their prints, it's really cool. So I ordered these things online. I hope they fit. I hope it works. I take lots of measurements and eventually they come. I put them on. And my wife's like, I'm not so sure. But then I put on the whole thing. She goes, oh my God, that is it, babe. I'm like, I know, because that's how I envisioned it in my mind. But just sitting there on the bed, she's like, I don't know. So I'm kind of excited about the dragonfly shirt with the black and white. It doesn't matter what I wear. I could wear a skirt, a pant, baggy pants, shorts. The combination of all the 3 things I'm using, the hat, the glasses, and the shirt, it really comes together.
That's a really nice shirt. I'm looking forward to seeing that on you because I've only seen the pictures.
It's tight. It's tight in ways I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's tight.
You said, what am I comfortable wearing? You asked yourself, like, what am I comfortable wearing? And then I'm wondering what's going through your mind. Why do you want to be at the edge of that? Where do you want to get to? What is the purpose?
I ask people to go out of their comfort zone in every different way. Pricing, relationships, events, travel, different tools that they might use to express themselves. And I find that if we expose ourselves to things that make us uncomfortable, at some point, those things that make us uncomfortable are no longer uncomfortable. And I think I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this when he said, there's the world that you know, and you can draw it on a map. What's really interesting is when you step to the edge of that, the world expands to meet you there every single time. And I really like that as a thought. And it doesn't have to be a thought. It can have physical manifestations. Like, for example, I don't know what the statistic is, but so many people have only lived within X radius of where they were born or grew up. And that's a lot of people, by the way, right? So there are people who live in a certain part of the United States or in Europe that just never venture probably less than 100 miles from where they are. Some people, they've never been on an airplane. They've never been cross county lines or have left the state. And we see that. And so we can do that physically and we can see like the circle does meet us there. We don't fall off a cliff. I'm also doing that in my professional life, like agreeing to speak in front of audiences on topics I don't know enough about. But the circle will meet me there. And so another way for me to express or experience this, to train my body, my mind, is to wear things that I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get a lot of attention that I'm not comfortable with, but I'm going to do it. So when I have these weird layered pant skirt things, I feel the heat on me and I just have to get used to it. And I'm okay with that.
We wear things to express ourselves, and you have a very distinct style. When you're choosing what you're wearing, what is it exactly that you're wanting the receiver who's seeing you to feel, think, or do? Is there something that you have in mind?
There is, but I would challenge the first statement a little bit, that we don't dress ourselves. We don't dress to express ourselves. I think most people dress by default. This is how my grandpa dressed. This is how my father dressed. This is how I would dress. This is how people in my society dress. And they stay within a very defined box. For guys, it's very easy to describe. Usually it's tennis shoes or sneakers, some kind of jean or khaki or something like that, and an ill-fitted shirt or a ugly t-shirt. A lot of guys dress mostly for comfort and convenience and what's not dirty at the moment. And I would say that would describe the larger portion of the people that I know. Less so in Europe, but more so in America, right? And when I'm dressing, when I look at my own clothes, I feel like I'm designing something and I want the design to look good. And so it's like if I make a poster or a post or it's something I'm wearing, I want to make sure that the combination has an interesting net result. So I'm always asking myself, do those yellow sneakers work with this handbag with that cap? Maybe, maybe not. And I'm willing to go out and not feel right. I'm like, why doesn't this work? And then come back and do it again. So my wife was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have to try this. I have to experiment. So the world of the street is my lab. And depending on how I feel and how I observe myself, then I'll make changes. But I don't think it just happens in your brain. You have to try it and go out and sometimes have a bad combination. And I know after I leave the house and I walk in them for a little while, like, oh, I see. And then I know how to fix it. So if you do this enough times, you'll have less fashion faux pas and more successes that you're like, I've never seen anybody wear that. And that's cool, right? That's what people will say to me from time to time. And so I'm doing two things. The intentionality is I envision some other part of my next career is I'm going to be a fashion designer. And so to be a fashion designer, you can't just be middle of the road and be interesting. You got to try something. You got to break the mold. You got to push the boundaries a little bit. And I'm fascinated by people who do and who could pull it off. There's a lot of ostentatious show costumey kind of pieces that never work in the real world. I'm not interested in that. I'm inspired by it. I'm like, but that's not what I want to do. So I want to do this. So I think of myself as a walking billboard for my future career, for my future adventures. And I also want to invite people to come and have a conversation with me because I'm so weird at starting conversations. And this is important. The next idea is I want to be recognized in a very specific silhouette so that when someone sees someone who looks like me, they assume it's me. And so to do that, you have to be consistent. And I guess the last little bit is I want to, in my own ways, communicate to other people. You can try this. It might work for you. Like, I don't feel like I need to be a pioneer of anything, but I want to be able to like say, it's safe for you to try this combination of things. And that's what I see in the real world. When I see, the reason why I started wearing flat brim snapback caps was because there was a young guy at one of my students' wedding, and I could see him from across the room. There might have been 150, 200 people at this kind of fairly, like young person kind of wedding. My wife and I, clearly outside of the parents and the uncles and aunties, were the older one. And I saw this guy make a line across the middle of the room, and he wore a cap and he had really cool style, and he turned out to be the DJ. Of course he was the DJ. And that's when I noticed I could wear a cap like that. So he kind of unknowingly gave me permission to try something. So what I'm trying to do is do the same for others, right? And I'll tell you something, it's really weird because straight men come up to me quite often, and even older married couples come up to me and say, you must be a designer. I'm like, sometimes. Or somebody who saw me at a True Food, and he kind of walked past as he was leaving with his family. He said, whatever that is, I love that. I don't even know what to call it because it was this weird layered thing I was doing, right? He's like, I don't want to insult you by describing it as a jacket or shirt, or I don't even know what it is, but I like what you're doing there. And I think that's cool. That makes me happy.
And it does inspire people because we see other people dressing like you, which means that the inspiration is right there for the taking.
Do we see other people dressing like me?
They take what they like from you and they wear it.
I'm not aware of those people, except for the one or two people I'm taking under my wing. Like, let's advance the game a little bit here. You're playing too safe.
Mm-hmm. Who are you taking under your wing? There's
two people in particular, Rodrigo and Rich. they've asked to go shopping with me so we can explore things together.
And if other people asked to go shopping with you, would you take them shopping?
It depends if they're in the inner circle or not. I don't go just randomly shopping with people. I'm like, I don't have that kind of time.
Maybe there's a program in the making.
Perhaps.
What is next for Chris Do? You've already hinted towards some things, but 5 years from now, where do you see yourself?
There's so many different things I see for myself. How do I answer that question that might satisfy the curiosity where it comes from?
What's one big thing that you're aiming for that you want to have completed in 5 years?
I'm kind of office homeless right now, which I'm trying to rectify. My office in Santa Monica doesn't serve me anymore because it's like an hour drive. And I can't be depleted of energy before I even start doing what it is I'm going to do. So I'm in search of a new space or place to kind of set up a new base of operations. In my dream world, there's just a ton of money that's coming in from all our fans. You know who you are. Don't be so tight, guys, gals. Send me some of that money because I want to buy a building or a residential place where I can host events and really kind of have this place where it's not school, it's not a mixer, it's not a networking or a club, it's something else. It's all those things. And I like that. There's this piece of property that I've seen. It was listed at, it's come down almost $1 million, but it was originally listed for $8 million, which I cannot afford to buy at this point. But it has a central house and it has a subterranean part and it has 2 or 3 detached home studio rooms and a great courtyard in the middle, big oak tree. There's a pool, outdoor space, and it's covered. So it's kind of like perfect. I can see myself setting up the podcast studio downstairs. So if you're in town and you want to record with me because you're part of the club, so to speak, you just record. You want to use it? Go ahead and use it. We're going to have an event later and Blair Enns, David C. Baker, and Marty Neumeier will be there, and we're going to have dinner and we'll talk about things, and there's music and it's catered, and there's something else that's happening, or there's a painting class or somebody's doing an AI contest jam session. And these are kinds of things I could host and be a part of to be able to create space for people to come meet, learn, and grow together. I would like that a lot.
That sounds dreamy and very viable in the very near future. I feel like
yes,
this
5 years
isn't-
you said.
Yeah, but I feel like surely this isn't 5 years away. This is a few years away.
Well, if you want to send me a couple $1 million, I'm ready to go, everybody.
I'm on it. Writing your check right now.
Everybody send your check to link in description below.
Yes, I will do that.
Make it happen, everybody.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Do you have a name for it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Dough House.
I don't know yet. Yeah.
No, just putting in my contribution right there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, would you like to come to a place like that?
I would love to come to a place like that. And I would love to have several around the world to be able to jump to.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
And maybe it's a place where like you can't stay there forever, but you can stay there for a night.
That's totally my kind of thing.
Right? So there'd be like a full-time housekeeper, cook. There's like live music sometimes. Just gentle, like guitar, acoustic, and people just hanging out. Like, and everybody's doing their own thing. And every corner of the house and property is so Instagrammable. So you'd walk away on one visit with 8 pieces of content, a podcast recording, a whiteboard session. And one of the other parts that I really want to be able to build is I know that comedians have venues in which they can hone their craft for doing stand-up comedy. But public speakers don't have any such thing. I don't want to do that. So it's a club. So it's like anytime somebody's in town, I'm like, hey, I can get 15, 20 people. You can just try new material. You can just come and find a voice or a bit that you want to do or talk about something and get real audience feedback. Wouldn't that be great? And, you'd have to pay something, but not an arm and a leg to just be able to show up and practice.
I would pay something. Like, that's worth something. It'd be worth an arm and a leg. The way it sounds, it'd be wonderful.
You know what's really cool is if we pool our resources together, we can do a lot. Individually, it's very difficult, right? So if I'm like, I want to build this by myself, it's tough. But if everybody who, like, let's just put this in real terms. We have 2.5 million subscribers on our YouTube channel. If each and every one of them gave us $4, which would get me way past my goal, that'd bring in, $10 million. If every subscriber who cared about us gave us $4, I'd be able to build this property. I wouldn't even need all the money. I would start this as prototype V1, do this event, and then just go like London, Paris, or Germany, or somewhere else, and just like we'll do this over and over. and we'll just build these places that we can jam. My friend Brian Collins has done something like this at Cannes. He rented a chateau. I don't know how many rooms there were, but he's like, if you're tired of the main crowd brand fest that's happening at what's happening at Cannes right now, come here. He has will.i.am sitting at a table with like, I don't know how many people, but that's what I want. That would be really cool.
Have you considered crowdfunding? I mean, this sounded like crowdfunding, but have you actually?
No, not yet. I think I can get there with different means, which you'll see the announcement coming soon. You know me, it's like there's layers within layers of things that are happening or in progress. So that's one of those layers.
Well, this is super exciting. I'll be watching this space, as will everyone else. Chris, is there anything that you want to share with the listeners that you're working on right now that you want to put them towards or point them towards?
Nothing specifically. I would just ask that each and every single one of you who've given me your time, I hope you've gotten value from this. And if you could just share this with one or two friends, that would mean a lot to me personally. We can't get to 1 billion without you and two of your friends. So if every person who got value told and kind of onboarded 2 new people to the channel, to the content, to the podcast or something, we would get there pretty quickly. And I think together we can do something. And I hope that if you've watched enough or listened to enough of our content, that you've seen me behave in ways that are consistent to who I am, and to know that I'm not a guy who's here to try to get rich quick. I don't need that. I don't want that. But I'm trying to make impact, but I need your help in this. And I've been, in my previous self, way more reluctant to talk about these things and saying, here's the hat. I'd appreciate if you put some money in the hat so that we can go build this thing. So I'm changing that about myself as well, to be less reluctant to ask, because I was thinking that cheapens the communication, the message. But there are so many people out there who probably want to help, but just don't know how, because I've made it really hard for them to figure it out. I don't want to be hard to figure out in terms of how to give us money. And I'll put it to good use, everybody.
And you will, for sure. I've been a member of the Pro Group for about 2 years now. It's one of my favorite communities. I've met lifelong friends there. I'm really grateful for you to have that, that you have that, so that I have met the friends that I have. And for everyone who's listening, let's make this house of sorts that is going to be developed by Chris, let's make it a reality. Let's get the millions together, and just a few dollars here and there from each person can make this a reality within literally a month if everyone actually actioned it. Thank you, Chris, for coming on to my podcast. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Always so full of wisdom and so generous with your time and with your knowledge. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me, Ivy. I appreciate the questions that you brought up and allowing me to speak about things I don't always get a chance to speak about. So I appreciate that. And best of luck to you and all the other things that you're going to do.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of The Creative Flight. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I invite you to leave a review. It really helps more creators find the show. For more insights and behind the scenes content, you can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can also check out my resources on ivymalik.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep creating, keep pushing those boundaries, and keep taking flight.